Now, our first story, government has extended the deadline for the domestic debt exchange program again to January 31, 2023 after backlash from stakeholders. This is the third time the Ministry of Finance has extended the deadline. We have a tweet from the Office of the Finance Ministry. If we have it, we can show it. It reads that building consensus is key to a successful economic recovery for Ghana, pending further stakeholder engagement with institutional and individual investors recently invited to join the debt exchange program. Government is extending the expiration of the DDE to January 31, 2023. We want to bring in Dr. Benjamin Alma, who is Senior Lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, also Executive Director of Center for Economics, Finance and Inequality Studies. Good afternoon to you, sir. Your thoughts on this latest development? Surprised by this?
Good afternoon. Not really surprised, because if you are following the discussion and the announcement right from the presentation of the 2023 budget, the discussions that started from then, and the fact that organized labor and the pensions industry succeeded in getting an exemption, an approach that government adopted in going after individuals in terms of following individuals, investors, to make up for what appeared to have been the lost ground from the side of the pension sector. One expected that definitely extensive negotiations must go on, and the period to negotiate and to come to an agreement was too short for government to go by the current deadline. So it is not surprising that there has been an extension. Will there be another extension? One cannot tell. But then if you have observed reactions, it looks like we are in this for a very long time to come in terms of getting to a conclusion on the acceptance or the rejection of the DDE program from the government.
Well, what has to change? We've heard many stakeholders call for a review somewhat.
Absolutely. There must be a review because, strictly speaking, the government is the borrower and all other parties here are creditors. But you see, what is happening is that because you are dealing with a sovereign, it appears that the sovereign has much power by the creditor. In any business arrangement, if the borrower, and in this case, the government is trying to undertake a preemptive default strategy. In other words, the government of Ghana foresees that the books are not too good, but the government of Ghana doesn't want to come to a point where it will default. So ahead of time, the government of Ghana is trying to preempt that strategy by coming at this proposal. One would have expected that the borrower will have engaged, but of course, we are talking about a sovereign setting where the sovereign has much power. So it's rather the sovereign that is dictating the pace and then inviting the creditors to come on board and to accept it. Definitely, in situations like this, you will expect that the creditors will push back, and no wonder the creditors are also pushing as much as they can to make sure that they don't suffer the haircut and the negative side of the debt exchange program that we are currently being told about.
Well, another interesting development has to do with the pushback from banks. We're actually going to discuss this before news came in about the extension. So a letter to the commercial banks from the Ghana Association of Banks was asking them not to sign on to the debt exchange until their demands are met. I want to read bits of that letter for you. It says, from the uncertainty surrounding the program, GAB, that's the Association of Banks, recommends that all banks must stay any further movement on exchange until our demands have been met. However, in the event that a bank may have to move forward to exchange, the MD or CEO must inform the CEO of GAB directly of the decision. That's a quote from the letter from the Ghana Association of Banks to commercial banks. Now, the banks were promised a financial stability fund. Appears this is not enough to convince them to sign on to the program.
Absolutely. You clearly have to understand why the banks are taking this position. You know, in all these debt exchange program, if you look at the pension fund, the insurance, the banks themselves, it's the banks that are the more or less the mother port that becomes the nerve center for the movement of all these funds. We should not forget that if you have looked at our data on intermediation, banks create on the average just about 45% of loans. If you look at the bank income structure, it is hovering around 48% from loans. So you need to ask yourself, the extra 52% of income, where is it coming from? It is coming from some of these investments that the bank also undertake. So if you're having an exchange program that is going to hard hit the banks in terms of their investment income, not the loan income, the banks have an interest. Two, you are also talking to the banks to be dealing or calling individuals to come and sign on this voluntary debt exchange program. What does it mean? Clearly, if individuals are hitting back at the banks, it has implications for deposits. And so the banks find themselves in a situation where they themselves as institutions are being affected. And then two, because they serve as a front, the primary dealers for these bonds, they also have to come in to deal with their client or customers on the other side. We should not forget the stability fund, I don't think it's only for the banks. It goes beyond the banks. It's open to the public through the financial institution. And so the banks have a major stake. And if their demands have not been met halfway, or the demands have not been met, it goes clearly to say that the banks will have to, for the time being, call for a move away by their members on this exchange program until they have a better understanding, a better appreciation of their points by the government. Then maybe they will come back and then advise their members, that is the banks, on what to do. But currently, the strategy of the banks is acceptable. They are in the forefront of all of this. And if this is not managed very well for the banks, it will affect them. As we speak now, one can comfortably say that confidence in the financial sector is at an all-time low. And definitely this is going to trickle into deposit, which will also impact on banks and businesses. So we need to look at it and address the concerns of the banks urgently.
Right. I was going to make the point about confidence in the banking sector and other operations of financial institutions as well, because that has been a big concern for many in that industry. And so I'm wondering now, where do we go from here? Government has extended the deadline, is hoping to engage the stakeholders some more, I believe. What has to give?
Yeah, definitely. At this point in time, every participant within this particular space, the government, the pension fund, insurance, individuals, financial institutions, mutual funds, each participant is trying to protect his or her interest. Definitely, because if you do not protect your interest, you are going to be sacrificed in the larger interest of all. So it is indeed a difficult time for government. There has been an extension. Let's see how the engagement will go between now and 31st. And let's hope that there will be some rethinking into the approach to this debt exchange program. Definitely, it's going to be very, very difficult for any institution now, at this point in time, to easily allow the state to use its resources or its interest in this debt exchange program for the larger interests of the entire stakeholders within the debt exchange agreement. One expects that government will have to engage more. One expects that there must be more public education. And above all, there must be transparency in this whole process.
Okay.
Three things come to mind. We need to ask ourselves, even if this particular debt exchange program will be successful, that is, even if it will be successful, we need to ask ourselves, how much are we looking at? One. Two, how much is it costing us to go through this debt exchange program? Three, how much are we saving as a country? We can call it profit, but how much are we saving as a country from this proposed debt exchange program? And what do we intend to do as a country with the savings that will come from this?
All right, Dr. Benjamin Amoah, Executive Director of Cephis, froze there a bit, also Senior Lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. I appreciate your time with us this afternoon. So rethink the domestic debt exchange program since it is destructive. This is the advice coming from a financial consultant, Dr. Daniel Sedo, as government races against time to have all individual bondholders sign onto the debt exchange program. Let's hear the thoughts of Dr. Sedo.
The thing is, what is it that should work? And who are you serving? You're serving the people. If the people are not happy, you can't continue. So you need to rethink and say, what is it that I can do for people to buy in? If you take the e-levy, for instance, there were a lot of reservations. Government push. Did it work? It didn't work. Because you must get the people to buy into whatever you try to do. So if you don't get the people on your side, you're better off not even starting. So government needs to think. I mean, that is why we've elected people to think for us. They need to do that. You see, in difficult times like this, the best thing to do is to drop taxes. Because let's remember, you are working in the interest of the people. Now you want to get people into employment, they're able to put bread on the table, kids go to school, there's roof over people's head. So the employers must be encouraged to do a lot more. So don't tie their hands, support them, help them to grow, and when they grow, they employ more people. When they employ more people, and the people get disposable income, when they consume, you get your consumption tax. So don't take the tax upfront and reduce their disposable income, and then they can't consume. They live miserably. So for me, I think it's a very simple process. Let's follow the way things are supposed to be done. Don't let us bend the rules and make life difficult for ourselves.
Well, more now on the debt exchange program. The Pension Bondholders Forum is threatening to picket the Ministry of Finance if government does or goes ahead to include their funds in the debt restructuring program. Convener of the group, Dr. Du Ananientri, says days after they called for audience with the Finance Minister, Ken Ofri-Atta, they are yet to get favorable response. The group has therefore notified the police to embark on a demonstration. Joining me with more on this, Michael Ashale, who is our reporter with JoyNews, who covered this event for us, and clearly, Michael, frustration building up from the pensioners.
For them, the major concern is getting an audience with the finance minister to explain to them exactly why they think, as pensioners who are individual bondholders, they should be exempted from the debt exchange program. They liken it to the situation where the pension schemes have managed to convince government, fronted by the labor unions, particularly the Trade Union Congress, to convince the finance minister to exempt their funds in the ongoing debt restructuring process. So if government has been able to agree to that particular arrangement, then as pensioners who have also gone, who have also bought some of these bonds, they believe that government should consider them under the same terms. So they will just want to explain this to the finance minister. And since last week, when they actually addressed their first news conference, they told us that they sent a petition to the office of the finance minister, but they are yet to get a favorable response. If the new information of the extension did not come today, they said that today was going to be the last day they were going to give the finance minister, after which they were going to hold their demonstration. But given the new information that came out, although they accept it in good faith, they say that their major concern again is still to meet the finance minister. Now they've extended the timeline they have given him from Monday. Now they are hoping to give him up until Friday, the 20th of January, 2023. If the finance minister is not able to meet them and hear their pleas, they have written now to the Ghana Police Service, notifying them of the intended demonstration to picket at the finance ministry. That's not all that they announced today. They also told us that they are petitioning new sets of people here, including the National Peace Council. They have also petitioned the Speaker of Parliament. They have now also petitioned many other groups they are hoping will help them get the ears of the finance minister and get him to understand their peculiar situation. At the time we spoke to them, or the first time they addressed a news conference, they told us that their number was 200 people who are registered with the Pensioners Bondholders Forum. As it stands today, just about 5 days into it, they have 400 people signed on to this. However, on the day of the demonstration, they're expecting 50 people, given the the nature of the people that find themselves within that bracket. These people are pensioners. Most of them are also weak and may not be able to stand the pressure of having to demonstrate.
Thank you so much, Michael Papani and Charlotte, there with that update. We'll keep following. Appreciate it. You're watching The Marketplace. We're taking a short break. When we come back, our segment, new series on managing your business in an austere economy. I've got a guest from KPMG. Do hang around. And welcome back to The Marketplace. Last week, we started a series on financial planning. It was quite insightful. And while this week, we're beginning a new one on managing your business in an austere economy. Joining me in studio to start us off is Gordon Dade, who is Senior Manager, Tax Unit, KPMG. Appreciate your time with us. Welcome to our studio. And so we want to first tackle the topic of austerity and what it means, because we've got that word going around, especially during these times, and what relation it has to do with taxes.
All right. Thank you, Daryl, for having me today in your studio. And when we talk about austerity, austerity has to do with a period where you have high debt levels, and at this time, government will look at different tools to use to manage the debt levels. And so normally, tax is one of the things that people normally talks about. But if you look at specifically the Ghanaian situation, we already have a number of tax handles in place, so we don't expect to see a lot of taxes. But what we see in these times is government's drive towards more of a tax compliance culture and trying to ensure that taxpayers are compliant, businesses are complying to their tax obligations. So you see somewhere around November, December last year, government started what they call the VAT invigilation exercise. And that exercise, of course, they announced that they got some revenue from that. Of course, they've tried to hold on the process, but we expect that we'll see more of a compliance thing and more tax audits in periods like this, because government will need more, do more to mobilize more revenue to bridge the gap that we have currently.
I mean, when people hear austerity, what businesses, some think, oh, that means you're going to pay some more taxes. Is that what it really means? Yeah,
so like I said, I mean, obviously, of course, because your revenue is down and your debt levels are high, you want to find ways to raise more revenue. And if you look at the Ghanaian situation, raising revenue, obviously, is tax. But again, like I'm saying, we are not expecting government to impose new taxes. We already have a lot of tax handles in the country, and therefore we know that governments, the work that they've already begun somewhere last year, they are going to continue and intensify their drive towards widening the tax net. And if I talk about widening the tax net, there are a number of things government can do, okay, to do that. So there's one particular thing that we talk about, what we call the import chain ladder. Now let me take my time to explain this to you. So import chain ladder, this means if you take an importer, maybe those who import, let's say for argument's sake, iron rods in this country. If one person, if you are able to identify the first 10, okay, major importers, and then you also identify the first 10 layers of people that they also import and they also sell to when they bring the goods into the country, what that means is that you are able to track how much iron rods came into the country, who they sold to, and of course you can build up the revenues that are going to accrue to those people and the cost that comes. So before these people come to pay their tax to you, GRA will already have information on them. And that will go a long way to help you to go tax assessment and know how much revenue people are making.
All right, let's talk about budget for businesses. Usually around this time, I'll be surprised if they haven't already drawn up their annual budgets. But how do businesses set their annual budget, especially during these times? Yeah,
so of course, this is a very challenging time and this is a very difficult time. But as a business, one of the things you want to do is to do an evaluation of your activity. So if you are doing budgeting, you want to look at your cost lines, you want to look at your revenue lines. You want to say, okay, so all these cost lines that I have, which of them can I put on hold, or which of them can I be more efficient towards? So for instance, when COVID struck the whole world, I mean, we all realized that even working from home was another medium that we were using. So today, if you're a business and, for instance, you have an office space that you are renting, that you are using in these difficult times, you want to ask yourself, do I want to continue paying all the rent for this space, or do I want to get some of my staff to work from home? If you're able to go through this process with thorough analysis, then you will know that, okay, some of these expenses that you are paying, you can actually reduce them. If you look at an expense like transportation, travels, okay, people who travel outside the country to go and do trainings and all that, you want to say that, okay, this time, can we do trainings virtually? There are benefits that comes with doing some of these things in person. Of course, the network, the connections that comes with it. But again, in very challenging times like this, you want to be sure you conserve cash because you need more cash to run your operations. And therefore, it's very imperative that businesses undertake some more planning. And when I talk about planning and budgeting, you know, even for individuals, when we say, I mean, sometimes when you engage people and say, oh, somebody's in a challenge, they say, oh, what are you doing? They say, oh, I'm praying about it. People say these things, they don't even pray. You know, so when you say plan, people say, oh, I'm planning. But people actually don't plan. People earn salary, you ask them how much you earn, what do you do with your money? They don't actually plan. People do the planning in their head. But I think that it's very important that when you are planning, you take a pen and a paper if you are doing pen and paper approach. If you're also doing a laptop, computer, any aid that you use for the planning. Daryl, as you sit here, very smart guy, if I ask you to do 96 times 95 for me in a very short second, that will be very difficult to do.
That will be very difficult.
That will be very difficult. So that's what happens when you are doing planning in your head.
Yeah.
But if I ask you to take a pen and paper and just do 96 and 95 for me, within a short second, you know that the results are about 9,120.
You're smart.
Very, very smart. Very, very simple. So you see, when you plan without taking time to put things on paper, that will be a very difficult process. And for businesses actually do planning. They do budgeting. But when it comes to businesses, the difficult aspect is the execution aspect. How do you ensure that whatever you have planned, you are going to execute that plan that you have put in place? And the execution comes with making sure that you put in place mechanisms to ensure that you hold people accountable for whatever you have put them in charge of. As a leader, for instance, you want to make sure that if you say you are going to have a percentage of a particular market, how do you ensure that the people you have put in charge are delivering to expectation? So the leader cannot go and sit and cannot go and rest at this time. What you want to do is to get involved in the process. You roll up your sleeves and get involved in the whole process, from the budgeting to the execution and everything.
Okay, so when you plan, then you need to manage the plan, right?
Sure.
And in these times where we also have economic shocks, because things do happen, how do you advise businesses to go about it, particularly, again, seeing that they have to pay several taxes?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that when it comes to taxes, okay, it's one area that a lot of people don't explore, but in times like this, the tax law has actually made provision for businesses who are not able to meet their tax obligation for particular periods. If for some reasons you are not able to pay the cash, you can actually write a letter to the Commissioner General and ask for extension of time to pay your tax. Okay, so when you are doing your planning, you've done your cash flow analysis and you know that maybe this particular period we are going to be low on cash. You can quickly put in a letter, a request, either through your consultants or through, your finance function, and make sure you talk to the GRA and come to an agreement. And then once that is accepted, you can do. And then another thing that you need to consider when you are doing the budgeting is, of course, you look at your revenue lines and make sure that I'm going to get this money, and therefore you plan. The tax authorities expect you to file your tax returns, to give them an estimate of what tax you pay every year.
Right.
And that is done by the first quarter. So once you do this, you want to look at what expenses are you supposed to incur, what revenues will you get. Then you do an estimate that you are required to pay the taxes on a quarterly basis, first quarter, second quarter. So if you have to revise that plan, then you can revise and then make sure that you pay the taxes that are due.
We just have a minute left, so I want you to use that 1 minute to advise businesses on some of the recommendations that you feel they can take on during these times to make them successful.
Yeah. So for businesses, I would say that, look, these are very difficult times and these are very challenging times, but I would summarize all this into three key acronyms that I would say. So I'll say PPE. The first P is for you to plan. Make sure that you plan very well and you review that plan. The second P will be to prioritize that plan that you have. Make sure that you push forward all the expenses that you need to pay first. And then the third item, which is the E, is execute. You have to make sure that you do a flawless execution of your plan. And when you do these things, you are able to stay afloat in times like this. Thank you.
Plan, prioritize, and execute. PPE. Thank you so much, Gordon Dade. He's Senior Manager, Tax Unit at KPMG. I think I'm going to have you on another day. Hopefully we'll see you. And thanks for watching The Marketplace, everyone. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. You've got news there about the price of petrol going up 13.90 cedis, diesel also going up 15.60 cedis. You want to read more on that, myjoyonline.com/business. We will be back same time tomorrow. Do stay tuned.